Good morning and welcome to the Global Weapon Index webinar to give you an introductory overview of the Pro platform and how and when you'd be using our data. I'm Stephanie and I work in the customer success team here. I also have Holly, who's a customer success manager with me, who will be able to answer any questions that you have in the chat function. Just before we kick off, it would just be great to know if we can all hear the audio. If you don't, just write into Holly and we'll just take a pause and address that. Great, so we'll get started then. So the agenda for today is to give you a brief overview of who we are here at GWI and what we do. Also to explain to you why you would use GWI, so when would you use the Pro platform, what's the main use cases that you can address using our data. Then for the majority of today, we're going to be jumping onto the actual platform and show you some examples of how you go about profiling to audiences. There will be a Q&A at the end, but please just write in any questions that you have as we go along, and Holly can get back to you in the chat, or we can address it as I go along. So a little bit about who we are and what we cover. So we're the world's largest study on the digital consumer. We cover 36 markets and we survey 350,000 panelists a year. We collect that data quarterly and then immediately release it onto the Pro platform. This means you'll always have really fresh, up-to-date data when you're looking at GWI. It also means that you can go in and trend over time and look at any sort of seasonality that there might be throughout the year. We also have an extended panel of 18 million online members. We can tap into that group of people if there's a certain category of data that we're not covering in the core survey that you feel would be relevant to the work that you're doing. We can then go back and ask them and then add those additional data points. With the way we collect data, so an online survey which takes about 35 to 40 minutes to fill out, and that's given to people between the ages of 16 and 64. So what to keep in mind is that we're representative of the internet universe. What this means is that in markets with a lower internet penetration, you will see a skew towards younger, more affluent, and more well-educated demographics. But in countries where the internet penetration is quite high, the internet universe will be quite similar to the national demographics. So again, because we actively collect our data, we can go in and track a single person's usage across multiple devices. So we can ask them what they're doing on their PC and laptop versus their tablet or mobile, and you can really easily compare and contrast how their behaviors on different devices look like. We can also ask about shared device usage, so which devices are they sharing with other people, how many people are they sharing those devices with, as opposed to passive data collection where you can't really detect when a device is being shared and behaviors of two different people might kind of be combined into just looking like it's one person doing this. We can also ask about VPN usage, so we cover whether they use ad blocking, what their motivations are to do so, and kind of their general behaviors around these types of services. This slide is just to give you a brief overview of some of the many applications of this type of data and some of the key ones that we see our users utilizing and leveraging GWI data for. So really, excuse me, so to distill all of this down, why GWI? GWI allows you to build your target audience to a really granular level, and it means that you can easily discover social, digital, media, and buying preferences of that specific audience. This allows you to really laser focus your campaign for maximum impact, and this way you can pitch to clients with true, active, and passive data, and with that, win more business. Are there any questions at this point, or are we happy to jump onto the platform? So for the next part, I'm going to take you through the Pro platform and looking at two audiences that we're going to build, and to show you how you can go about quickly profiling what their digital lives look like. First off, this is what it looks like when you log into the platform. So you can see we have our welcome screen here, and then we have a few different calls to actions and explanations about the key parts of the platform. We also have a help mode to kind of ease your understanding of what each section of the platform does. So here you can toggle that on or off, but once it's on, when I hover over something, it'll just give me a reminder of what it is that I'm looking at. Should you have any other questions, we also have an in-app chat function. So here you can just click into that and then write into us as you're on the platform, and we can get back to you that way. Now over here on the left-hand side, you'll see the 6 key segments of the platform. So in the bottom 3 here, we have our charts of the day, infographics, and reports. These are all our off-the-shelf material that our in-house trends team has put together and using our data. So just to give you an example of what that looks like, here you'll see the most recent one, so social media motivations. You'll see when it was published, and then you can click into the report. This is a really great way to get a lot of insight without doing any of the analysis using the tool. However, all of this is looking at global trends. So if you want to just focus on a specific market, you'll have to use the chart builder and audience builder, which we'll take you through next. So as I mentioned, the top 3 ones then is where you can really conduct your targeted analysis. So before going into any of these features, I'm just going to tell you how they relate to each other. So Audience Builder is where you'll go in and define the audience that you want to profile. So here you can use any of our 8,500 data points to create the different attributes you want your audience to have. And then in Chart Builder and dashboards, you can go and profile that subset of respondents against the rest of the data. So if I start by clicking into Audience Builder, once I open that, you'll see in my audience bank here, I have all of the ones I've already built. You also have your shared audiences. So if you're more people in an organization, you can all then see the audiences you've chosen to share. And then we have some default ones. So if you just want to start going without really building an audience yourself, you can use some of the ones that we have used in our reports. Now, first off, I'm going to click plus here where it says create to start building my first audience. And what we're going to be looking at today is an attitudinal data point. So we're going to be looking at people who tend to opt in for loyalty rewards and compare and contrast that to people who tend to opt out from those kind of schemes. So first, I'm going to name my audience. I'm going to call this one opt-in, loyalty rewards. Just confirm that using the tick mark here, or just hit enter. You can see that will update my title. And then I click add an attribute to start layering the different data points that I want this persona to have. So if I click into GWI core, attitudes and lifestyle, and then attitudes and interests, you'll see we have self-perceptions here. You can also use the search function up here to just quickly see if we have a specific data point you're looking for. And also it's a bit easier doing it that way if you're not that familiar with the navigation when you're just starting out on the platform. So here, when I click into self-perceptions, you'll see it opens the list of the different perceptions that we cover. I'm going to scroll down to find the self-perception. I tend to opt in for personalized loyalty rewards from brands. So I'm going to click that one and you'll see it opens up here. Now here I get to pick the level of which I want them to agree or disagree with this. So since we're looking for the opt-in loyalty rewards, I'm going to sort out everyone but the people who say they strongly agree with that statement. Now when I do that, you'll notice that my total down here updates. So the total shows you what your global sample size is, and you can also hover over each of the different quarters here to see how many were in that specific research wave. You'll also see some of them here are red, so they're the ones with 0 in them. and you can see here why that is. We added this self-perception to the survey in Q4 2012. Now, to create the people who tend to opt out or not opt in to these loyalty rewards, I can either then click Create again and open up a new blank audience. I can also use the Copy Audience function here. So see, that opens up an exact copy of what I just created. I'm just going to change the title, so opt out, confirm that, and then here I can just go in and say strongly disagree, and then take out strongly agree. So if you have a really complex audience or you just want to save some time, the copy audience function is really helpful to create audiences that are quite similar, but maybe just have a few differences in their attributes. Up here, where the copy audience function is, you'll also see the ability to share your audience and delete your audience. Now, when I'm happy with my two audiences, I can click here on Query the Data, and that will take me back to the welcome screen. So having defined who I want to profile, I can now go in and look at their behaviors against the rest of the data. So I can do that going to Chart Builder to start off with. Now, because I've just created these audiences, although I've seen the global sample size, I might want to just focus on a specific market or region. So for today, I want to focus on the US, and therefore I want to check what my sample size is within that market. I do that by going into Core and then Demographics, but I can also just search here. So I'm going to put in audience size, open that. And here you'll see the ability to check what your audience size is for a specific market. The way you do that, you have to apply your filters over here. You have to do that every time you start your analysis. So at first, if I don't pick any audiences here, I'm looking at all internet users. So I'm going to pick my opt-in loyalty rewards and opt-out loyalty rewards. Then I also want to select the market, so the US in this case that I want to look at. So if I click in here to the location icon, you'll see a list of all of the key countries that we cover. If I don't pick anything here, the default mode is to go to a global view of the data. So here I'm just going to scroll down, click on the US, you'll see there's a blue bubble next to it now, and it also says 1 over here. Now if I wanted to look at the US and maybe the UK as well, I can go in and click on the different countries I want to be included in my market. But for now, let's just focus on the US. Lastly, we want to define the research period that we want to be included. Again, if I don't pick anything here, the default mode is that it gives me an average since we started collecting data, so in 2009. Here you can go in and select, so I want to look at the last year's worth of data. This lets me factor in any seasonality, but it also opens up my sample size. So now that I've selected these different filters, I can then check what the exact amount of respondents that fall into these two categories in the US over the last year have been. So here, if I look at responses, we'll see that we have 5,100 people that would fall into our opt-in loyalty rewards and 2,000 that fall into our opt-out loyalty rewards. If I want to save this to have a look at later, just to remind myself, I can really easily save this as a query, which will remember all of the filters that I have on. If I just want to save the question, because this is something I'll be using a lot, every time I build a new audience, I should check the audience size, then I can save this question as a bookmark, which won't save any of the filters or audiences that I've applied. So now that I've checked my audiences, I can then go in and have a look at some of the other behaviors or attributes. So to start off with, I might want to look at some demographic stats about these two audiences. So if I want to first go in and look at what age groups that these two audiences fall in, I'm just going to click into that. Here you'll see what the question was in the survey. So we asked them how old they are, and then it was grouped into these different age groups covering 16 to 64-year-olds. Now here we can already see just visually that our opt-in for loyalty rewards tend to have a bit more of a younger skew, whereas the people who would opt out definitely have an older skew. But just to show you, or to explain to you how to read these different metrics, first of all, let me just change the chart type so they're a little bit easier to read. So I changed my charts down here. So I'm going to put this in horizontal format. And then here, you'll see we have audience percentage. So audience percentage is the percentage of your audience that this particular data point applies to. So here we can see that for opt-in loyalty rewards, 17.4% would be between 16 and 24. Then we have our data point percentage, which is the inverted way of looking at that. So here we can see out of 16 to 24-year-olds in the US, out of that group, what percentage would also opt into loyalty rewards. So 15.7% of 16 to 24-year-olds in the US would opt in for loyalty rewards. Then we have our universe figure, which is a projection or an estimate showing you how many people this actually applies to. So we estimate that there are 5.7 million 16 to 24-year-olds in the US who would also opt in for loyalty rewards. Then you have your index. So this is an indicator of likelihood, and this is comparing the audiences you've applied to your base audience. Because we've picked the US over here in our country selection, the base audience is the US internet users. So here we can see that people who opt in for loyalty rewards, since they're under 100, it means that they're less likely to be in this age group. So they're 6% less likely to be between 16 and 24. Then we also have our responses count. So this is slightly different than your total sample size. This will just show you the amount of responses out of your sample size that opted in to this data point or said, yes, I am between 16 and 24. Are there any questions on the metrics, or does that all make sense? We'll be going over this a few more times, just using particular examples, but feel free to just write in if there's any questions. So in particular here, it's quite interesting to look at the indexes. So where we can see for 16 to 24-year-olds, both in terms of the audience percentage and in terms of the index, they have a similar pattern within our youngest age group. But as we move to 25 to 34-year-olds, we can see people who strongly agree with opting into loyalty rewards. They're 46.9% more likely to be in this age group than the average American internet user. Similarly, with people who tend to opt out of these loyalty schemes, if we look at our oldest age group, we can see that here the opt-outers are 48.2% more likely to be in this age group than the average American internet user. So already here we've discovered some key differences between these two audiences. Now, if I want to take this data off the platform, I can either do a single export using this function down here. So I can export it as an image, as raw data, or as a data pack. But if I'm doing a more extensive analysis, I might want to do a multiple export in the end. So therefore, I'm just going to save this as a query. Again, just a reminder, a query will save the question and the filters. So here I'll put in loyalty rewards just to remind myself of what it was that I'm looking at, and then confirm them. Now your saved queries will sit here. So you have your categories, which is the main kind of where you go between the different data points, your bookmarks, and then your queries sit here. So that's an easy way for you to return to what you're looking at. Now going back into our core data set, if I wanted to start profiling maybe some of their other self-perceptions and see which ones they're most likely to agree with, I can then go back here into attitudes and interests and start profiling more of their own perceptions. So here you'll see that right now everything says 100. Whenever you see this, it either means that you're looking at something that you've built into your audience, or that you need to select the different options. So you select the options up here, and similarly to what we did in Audience Builder, we just filter out the ones we don't want to look at. So I want to see which statements that these two audiences strongly agree with. going to select strongly agree. You see it highlights in blue here, and it also says 1 here. When I click out of that, the data will update. Now, right now, all of our answer options are in alphabetical order. And again, I'm going to go down to here where I'm changing the chart type. I'm going to sort the data points. So for now, I want to see it in descending order. So here we'll see the most popular by audience percentage. You'll notice here that the top one, so I tend to opt in for personalized loyalty rewards from brands, is obviously going to be 100 because that's how we defined our audience, and then 0 because we defined our audience to say strongly disagree. Now, if I don't want to include that data point for that reason, I can just search my data points up here. I'm going to just search for loyalty. I click that, that'll just sort it out to avoid any confusion about that. Now here again, we see some quite distinct differences between our two audiences. So for our opt-in audience, the top statement that they strongly agree with by audience percentage is it's important to be well informed about things. For you see 68.2% of this audience strongly agree with that statement, and they're 51.4% more likely to strongly do so than the average American internet user. Again, we can see here that our opt-out audience is about average for this, so very similar to the average American internet user. Let's go and scroll down. Again, just visually, we can see that they're quite different, these two audiences, in terms of their self-perceptions. Interestingly here, we can see that for our opt-in, more than 1 in 2 would say they strongly agree with that they always like to try new products. Very small percentage of our opt-out audience would say the same. Now here we can look at the sorting by audience percentage, but if what I'm really interested in here is the indexes, I have a last option down here in formatting my chart where I can just click on index if I want to sort it in descending order so the top indexes are first. So the top index for our opt-in loyalty audience is the statement, I find that I'm easily swayed by other people's opinions. They're 216.5% more likely to strongly agree with that statement. And we can see that's in stark contrast to our opt-out loyalty rewards audience. So yeah, just a few different ways you can go about not only profiling the demographics, but also some of their outlooks and self-perceptions. I'm just going to switch back to looking at the audience percentage first. So now we've identified some key differences in terms of their age, also some differences in their self-perceptions. We can then further add to kind of understanding who these people are by looking at their personal interests. So again here, quite big differences for these two audiences. So it gives you an idea of not only how they perceive themselves, but also what their key interests are. And then lastly, we can also go in and link that back to how they're using the internet. So if we want to first broadly look at what are their motivations for going online, you'll find that again under attitudes and lifestyle. As you'll notice, we have the 100 going through all the way, and that is again because we need to go in and filter the options. So I only want to know what's very important for them in terms of their reasons for using the internet. So here we'll see that 70% of people who opt in for loyalty rewards say that researching how to do things is very important for them in terms of using the internet. They're 34% more likely to think that or say that than the average American internet user. Now, having gone through this again, we can see that there's quite a lot of difference between these two audiences. A lot of this can probably also be attributed to their different age groups. As we can imagine, kind of the millennial age range, which the opt-in loyalty rewards are in, are probably going to be more engaged online than people who would opt out for these. Now, if I wanted to actually look at what kind of, how they spend their time online and what kind of media that they're engaging with, I can then go into media consumption. And here I can look at their daily time spent on media. And to start off with, we can look at one of the segmentations. So the segmentations are where we've put together different groups, and then you can go in and kind of put together data from the other parts of that question, and then look at that in a grouping. You'll be able to find the definitions of the segmentations on our knowledge base, where you'll also find a lot of other helpful articles. So yeah, we'll post that on the chat for you guys to have a look at. It's a really great place to find resources on any questions that you might have. So again, for the options, I want to know which types of media that opt-in and opt-out loyalty rewards are high or heavy users of. So I'm just going to select both of them. Here we can see the top one by audience percentage is television for the opt-in, followed by social networks or services. Again, here the index tells an interesting story in combination with the audience percentage. Let me just scroll down. Now, this is a great way to start out figuring out exactly what type of media that these audiences like to engage with. If I then wanted to go into more detail about social networking services, I can then go in and look at that in more granular detail. So here's the time spent on social networks. And here I'm just, again, going to put my data points in alphabetical order, so it's chronologically sorted. And for our opt-out loyalty rewards audience, we can see that less than 30 minutes, they're both over-indexing for that, and about 1 in 4 would say they spent less than 30 minutes during a typical day on this type of media. But more importantly, 1 in 4 would also say that they do not use social networks or services. They're 83.5% more likely to not use this type of media than the average American internet user. So if I wanted to save this, again, I'm going to go in and save this as a query. I think it's interesting and I want to include that in my analysis when I take it off the platform. So I'm just going to put in loyalty rewards and then just hit enter to confirm that. Now that I've identified definitely one of the key areas where these two groups are different, I might want to figure out a little bit more about where in the consumer journey that the social networks play a part for the opt-in loyalty rewards, but also for the people from our opt-out section, where they're actually using it. So I'll do that by going into the marketing touch points. And this, as I mentioned, links back to the consumer journey from brand discovery to product research and through to brand advocacy. We have a lot of different questions that answer how these people engage with brands. So firstly, I'm going to look at brand discovery. Here, you'll also see the zeros here. So that's just because we stopped asking that particular part of this question in Q3 2015, and we've defined we only want to look at the last year's worth of research. Again, I want to see the data points in descending order, so I'm just going to jump in to that. And here we can see the top one for both of our audiences is ads seen on TV. And we can then also see, though, that they're pretty average for this. Now if we scroll down, interestingly here as well, we can see the opt-out loyalty audience, a higher percentage will say a word-of-mouth recommendation from a friend or family member. So where we see the over-indexes for our opt-in audience is for TV show films, brand product websites, but also a recommendation and comment on a social network. So that already tells us that in the discovery phase of brand products or services, opt-in loyalty rewards audience is more likely to use that type of media in this part of the consumer journey. Now again, just going to save this too. And you'll just see it come up here in my saved queries. If I go back into marketing touchpoints, I might also want to look at if, in terms of product research, if social networks also play a part here. So here you can see what we've asked the panel is in which of the following online sources do you mainly use when you're actively looking for more information about brands, products, or services? And then we have the different listings here. So here we see search engines. So about half of our opt-in audience say they use search engines to actively look for information, but they're 10% less likely to be using this type of source to do so. However, our opt-out loyalty rewards audience, about 63% of them say they use search engines, and they're actually a bit more likely to do this than the average American internet user. Scroll down here. Again, we'll see social networks also play a part here for our opt-in audience. So more than 1 in 3 would say that it's one of the main ways they find out about information about brands, products, or services when they're actively looking for it. And again, 35% more likely to do so. So again, we've seen some of the key differences. So for our opt-out audience, search engines seem to play a bigger role. And for our opt-in audience, social networks seem to have a very key role in all of the different stages that we've looked at of the consumer journey so far. Now, if I want to go into more granular detail first about social networks, I'm going to do a little bit more digging about what our opt-in audience and also our opt-out audience actually use social media for. So here you'll see the social media category, and there's a few different ways we can start off profiling that specific media in relation to our two audiences. First of all, I'm going to start at a high level and look at the reasons for using social media. So I'm going to click into that. Here we can see the top one by audience percentage is to stay in touch with what my friends are doing, because a lot of their friends are on them. Just going to scroll down to give you guys an idea of the types of questions we've asked. But here as well, you'll see, not surprisingly, that for opt-in audience, 27% say that one of their main reasons for using this type of media is to research or find products to buy. And they're 50% more likely to say that than the average American internet user. Now, this gives me an idea of the different motivations at a high level. So this isn't about any particular network. So I might want to look at where these two audiences actually behave online or are online. So if I go into reach, I can start profiling specific platforms or networks that they're on. So we can look at reach in terms of members. So that would be where they hold an account. And here we can see the top one is Facebook, followed by YouTube, Facebook Messenger. And especially for Facebook Messenger, almost 70% of our opt-in audience has an account to this service, and they're 23% more likely to do so. Now, so that's just having an account, but if we also want to get an idea of which ones they visit, we can go into visitors users. So this is the ones that they've used in the past month via either PC, laptop, mobile, or tablet. And what we'll see here is now that YouTube is actually the highest one by audience percentage, at least for our opt-in audience. For our opt-out, Facebook is still slightly higher. I mean, this makes sense as well. You wouldn't necessarily need to hold an account for YouTube to be able to engage with it, but it's just quite interesting to see the differences in how these networks rank when you look at it in terms of different ways of categorizing the reach. Lastly, we also have engagers and contributors. So this is where our two audiences perceive themselves to be the most highly engaged and contributing to that community or network. And here again, we'll see that Facebook is the top one. But again, when we look at the indexes in combination with the audience percentage for our opt-in loyalty rewards audience, about 1 in 3 say that they actively engage with Facebook Messenger, and they're 14.2% more likely to do so than the average American internet user. Here we can also see Instagram is over-indexing quite a bit, as well as Twitter. Now again, this gives us an idea of which channels that these two audiences are on, but we also want to profile specifically what are they doing on those platforms to get us an idea of the different ways they might be willing to engage with brands or not willing to engage with brands, depending on which specific network it is. So to look at that, we're going to go into the next tab, which is platform-specific behaviors. And here we can start off with looking at Facebook. And here you'll see a list of different actions that you can take within Facebook, and you'll see what percentage of your audience have done that in the past month. Now we cover 30 different data points for this, so maybe I just want to look at the ones that are related to brands. So I'm going to deselect everything by clicking the blue bubble next to the search. I'm going to type in brand, and then I'm just going to click the same bubble here, and that will just select everything that's related to brands within these data points. So here we'll see, for example, that almost 29% of our opt-in audience have visited a company, brand, or product's Facebook page in the last month, and again, over-indexing for this. You can see that they're also quite keen to share a photo, video, or post or articles for companies and brands, and it just gives you a profile of how they're behaving within that specific network. Now, if I want to save this, I'm just going to save this as a query as well, and it will also remember here that I've only selected the 10 data points that relate to brands. Just to have a look at one of the other key networks that came up here, I also want to have a look at Facebook Messenger. So here again, you'll see the different ones that we cover for Facebook Messenger. And here you'll also see sent or received a message from a brand or company. So about 1 in 10 of our opt-in audience have received a message from a brand in the past month. They're 103% more likely to have done so than the average American internet user. So I want to save this as well, so I get a full profile of how our opt-in and opt-out audiences behave within kind of the Facebook social ecosystem. So that's a few ways that you can go about looking at, in particular, social media here. But if I also wanted to dig more into, for example, the search engines element, I could go into online activities and behaviors. Here you can go in and look at where they're searching. So if I wanted to see people who search on PC and laptop, I'm going to go in. You can see it's the top one, but I just want to sort it out because I only want to include search. So here we can see the percentage of our audiences that have used the search engine on their PC and laptop. I'm going to save that. And then I'm just going to go in and compare that to people who have searched on mobile. So here we can see visited or used the search engine. And we'll see that although for our opt-out audience, search engines played quite a key role in their product research phase. But as we could see, it's probably mainly through PC and laptop and not as much through mobile. which our opt-in audience is actually over-indexing for. So far, we've profiled the different ways that these two audiences look demographically, so quite key differences in terms of their age groups that they fall into. We've also looked at their self-perceptions and how they view themselves and the reasons for using the internet in general. We've looked at how their media consumption looks like, so the amount of time they spent on different medias. Here we recognize that social media in particular was important for our opt-in loyalty program audience. And we've also then looked at more granularly, how does that relate to their consumer journey? Which channels are they on? How are they using those different platforms? So that's just a way that you can go about kind of creating the different personas and really start understanding how they're using different online platforms or how they're behaving online and how that relates to the way that you can profile them or really start to target them where it's most effective. Again, we've done quite a lot of discovery here. I also want to take this data out of the platform, maybe to format it differently or to put it in a presentation. So I'm going to go into my queries, and up here I'll have the option to do a multiple export. So if I click that, then I'm just going to select all of the ones here. You can see the loyalty rewards one, and just confirm that, and that will automatically take all of the data into an Excel sheet for me that I can then use to format it differently or to do further analysis on. Hopefully that gave you guys a good overview of the different ways that you can use the Pro platform to profile your specific audience. Does anyone have any questions at this point? If you don't right now, but want to have a play around with the tool yourself, if you go to GlobalWebIndex.net, you'll be able to find the different sign-up pages where it outline the different types of access you can get. Here you can also sign up for a 14-day free trial, and that way you can have a look at the platform yourself. Again, if you have any questions or any sort of data that you'd like to know if we cover, feel free to write into customersuccess@globalwebindex.net, and we'll be happy to get in touch with you or discuss the different options for having access to this type of data and profiling tool. Thanks a lot for joining, guys. I hope you all have a lovely day or evening, depending on where you are.